So regardless of how trivial it is that their favorite Lego broke, right? It's something that you have to validate.
Hi everyone, and welcome to Ask Me Doctor Season 3, a health video series for you and your family. I'm Syahira from motherhood.com.my. From birth, warm and gentle responsive interaction helps children feel safe and secure in their world. It also builds and strengthens the bonding between children and their parents. To grow and develop skills, children need safety, security, and strong relationships. Thus, communicating effectively with children is essential to their holistic environment. To help parents determine the best approaches to interact with children, I present to you a psychologist from Pantai Hospital Kuala Lumpur, Ms. Katyana Azman. Hi, Ms. Katyana. How are you today?
Hi, Syahira. I'm doing okay.
So I have a lot of questions for you today. Can we get started?
Yes, go for it.
All right. So my first question for you today is, could you define what is good communication with babies and children? And how do we know the way that we interact with our child or our baby is a good one?
So, I mean, ultimately, remember that when you're trying to communicate with your child, especially when they're very little, you are introducing them to what healthy communication styles are all about. So if you are sort of imposing on your child communication styles which are not exactly healthy or appropriate, like for example raising your voice, using physical force or aggression to express that you're unhappy, even some parents using things like silent treatment to show that I'm not happy with you. If those are going to be things that they learn and they take on board, right? So it's very important to remember that so long as you are communicating with your child in a way that they can then replicate in adulthood, that's pretty much good communication, right? So it need not necessarily be something that's interactions need to be something that's 100% full of cuddles, because I do speak to some dads who feel a little bit like not the cuddly type, but is that necessary? Yeah. So there's no one standard format, so long as, like you said earlier, it's something that is driven by love and care and affection, and it's also something that we take into consideration they're going to be replicating in adulthood. So make sure that whatever you're introducing them to is stuff that you're pretty happy for them to keep doing as adults. But if you're doing things that you think, oh, I wouldn't like my child to be this aggressive or to talk back to me this way, probably don't even start doing it with them.
All right, great. So my next question for you is, what are the tips that you can share with us to develop good communication with our children, especially for working parents?
Again, going back to leading by example, right? So if you're wanting your child to be a good communicator, someone who uses their words rather than just crying and throwing things and things like that, you need to kind of set the tone, right? Yeah. The other thing is also validating what your child says, because remember, if your child at age 3 or 4 comes to you with a problem or comes to you with something they're unhappy about, chances are we're not going to think it's a big deal. Chances are we're going to be like, that is not that major, right? But whenever we shut it down and we tell them, oh, that's nothing, just get over it, or mommy's so much more stressed than you, when you kind of portray that, you're telling your child that their feelings don't matter, you're invalidating their experience. And so regardless of how trivial it is that their favorite Lego broke, right, it's something that you have to validate. And so these are sort of the main things that I tell parents to remember, and also to factor in the fact that depending on how old your child is, they're not going to have the speech and language capabilities to tell you everything about their life. They're not going to be able to go, Mom, this is why I'm stressed, this is what happened. Right. They can't do that.
They communicate in different ways.
Exactly, right? And so that's something that you have to factor in as well. You might need to use creative tactics like art and drawing and crafts and play to try to get your child to talk about their emotions, right? And so don't feel deterred that your child is not using their words, especially in the early years of their life. So just making sure that you set the tone, that they can come to you whenever they need to, that communication is back and forth, that we will share with them as well. It's a pretty good formula in my opinion.
Basically making them, reassure them that it's a safe space between you and them, right?
100%, yes.
Okay. Well, my next question for you is, All right, so some say that active and effective communication should come with effective listening. Could you explain this?
A lot of times, and this is my favorite quote, a lot of the times people listen to answer. They don't listen to understand. And so that's kind of what I think about when I think about active listening, right? A lot of people are usually focused, they're in their heads trying to think about how do I reply to this situation without taking the time to actually listen to what is being communicated. And like I said, when you have a child who doesn't have the words or the grammar or the vocabulary to be able to articulate things in that way, being an active listener is no more important than when you're working with your child. Looking for subtle nuances in how their body language, for example, has changed. When they're telling you things like, I'm hurt, right? Focusing on what they're saying rather than trying to justify why they shouldn't be hurt in your head, right? So these are the types of things that are super important when you're working with children, is to just listen. This applies to everyone, regardless really of whether you're dealing with a child or an adult. You know, oftentimes it is more important to practice active listening and to listen to what they're saying and respond based on what they're saying without kind of having to focus on other trains of thoughts in your mind.
So basically, let's see if I can get this right. So let's say if a child comes to you and they're saying, mommy, I'm hurt, but actually nothing's happening. Maybe it's a sort of like a subtle sign that something has happened. Maybe they could be anxious, or it could be some sort of other reason, but they're just portraying it in a different way. Is that correct?
So an example for me of active listening, if we're looking at the hurt example, would be if a child ran up to you and said, mommy, I'm hurt, right? Parents who aren't practicing active listening would either try to be like, well, you look okay, you know, like everything's fine, you know, because you're thinking about a response. Or, sweetie, mommy's really busy right now, you know, I'll talk to you later. You're not focusing on the content, which is that they're hurt, right? So appropriate response would be like, oh dear, okay, why? Right? So getting them to talk to you and explain why.
I see,
you know, and then without you trying to interpret based on what is in the environment of what is going on. So asking why is a really good question most of the time, which I think people don't do enough of. So if your child is telling you something, don't jump to the first conclusion which your brain has probably come up with. You might be right, but always a good idea to just ask why and understand the situation and then address it as it comes.
That's good. That's a lot of good tips. I really have to put it to practice as well. So, okay, my final question for today is, could you list out some positive phrases that parents can express to their children?
I think that praise is something we don't do enough with our kids. I think because it comes back again to the generational programming that if you praise your child, they're going to get a big head, right? But praise is actually really important because it teaches our children how to acknowledge their strengths, but also to teach our children what is, not to say right or wrong, but when they're on the right path and when they're not, right? And I would love focusing on things that are not, I know we've probably heard these things like clever girl, clever boy, smart girl, smart boy.
I do that with my baby.
Yeah, I would much prefer if we focused on, especially when they're older. When they're little, I'm completely fine with that. But when they're sort of at toddler age, when they can kind of understand, focusing on things like efforts. So be like, you were really good for sharing today. That was really kind what you did. Look how hard you worked. That's amazing, right? Focusing on the effort rather than sort of this concept of smart, clever, pretty, ugly, I don't know, that kind of thing, right? So focusing on those types of things.
So sort of like going more into detail than just that general specific, like, oh yeah, good, clever girl, good girl.
Yeah, so kind of telling them that, you know, effort is equally as rewarding as the outcome in a way, right? So those are the types of things that I think is really important, is to praise and acknowledge, which is the second thing. Acknowledging your child's emotions and your child's comments is really important. It's not going to cost you anything to just parrot what they say, not in a condescending way, but just like, oh, okay, you're upset because you lost at the game, huh? You know, you're sad that your friend doesn't want to play with you. You're repeating what they're saying so that they can kind of go, okay, so I am sad because of this. You're teaching them how to be constructive in the face of being upset, right? You're teaching them to acknowledge their emotions. And so those are things that I think that we need to kind of do more of, instead of something that I see a lot of people do, which is they kind of sweep it under the carpet. They kind of go, oh, you shouldn't feel this. It's fine. There are other kids who've got worse things than you. Look at how many toys you have. You know, you should be grateful. These are the types of things that we're kind of pushing on our kids sometimes when they get upset. But they've only been on earth for X number of years. They don't have the life experience that we do. Fingers crossed we do it the right way, they will one day. But for now, it's important for them to learn kind of in their environment, and also validating and acknowledging what they feel. So I think that just being able to do that practice active listening and validating what your child feels and acting on it, I think is a really good place to start.
And what about in terms of like body language?
So when it comes to, that's how I feel. I read most of my clients' body language more than I listen to what they say, especially when they're little. Your child's body language will teach you so much. So if your child is starting to look uncomfortable, so we're looking at, for example, averting their eye contact or turning their body away from you, or kind of playing with their hands, or kind of going on their phone if they have it, those are all indicators that they're uncomfortable with what you're talking about, or it's something that they're not yet ready to speak of, right? So if you're seeing these things which you might do if you're uncomfortable, take that as an indication that you've hit a bit of a sore spot and you have to either table it and come back to it, or try a different approach, right? Don't kind of stick to it if you feel your child isn't very comfortable. And also, if your child is acting up, throwing a lot of temper tantrums, for example, it's an indication that they're struggling. So you need not use words because, like I said, they might not have them yet. Look at their behaviors, look at their body language, look at what's happening around your child, and that will usually give you a good place to kind of, focus your efforts.
So basically, in general, it's important to really listen to your child. It's important to look for subtle signs even, and I think it takes a lot of patience. Be patient with your child, isn't it? And key communication. Am I right?
100%, all those things.
Well, thank you so much, Miss Katyana, for your time and for sharing facts with us. I definitely learned a lot today, and I'm sure that our viewers really appreciate all your knowledge and everything that you've shared with us.
Thank you.
Well, I hope that you enjoyed today's episode as much as I did. Please stay tuned for more videos on Ask Me Doctor. Thank you so much for watching. Till next time, I'm Syahira Khan.
And I'm Katyana Azman.
This is motherhood.com.my. See you again soon. Bye!